All right, welcome everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening once again, and welcome to this very important conversation. Today, we're talking extra seats for women. My name is Abosede Jojogan, and I'm the founder of Women in Leadership Advancement Network. Thanks to everyone who joined earlier, and thanks to everyone who's been patient with us. We are back now and we are ready to rock and roll. So as I said, today we're going to be talking about extra seats for women. And joining us to have this conversation, which is the first in a 5-part series. So we're going to have this conversation every day this week. And to lay a solid foundation, we have Nkiru Uzodi, who's a program manager for the Policy and Policy and Legal Advocacy Center PLAC. So Nkiru, oh yes, so we have Nkiru here. So Nkiru, really good to have you with us. I missed the technical challenges earlier.
Yeah, so sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right.
I
mean,
am
the most
really
like here now.
Yeah, I was like almost panicking. In fact, I was panicking.
Don't
I think
worry.
I was in
Has
sweat. I am very, 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 very bad with Instagram Live and the rest of it. My apologies.
But thank you so much for being here, Nkiru.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to everyone who is joining us. We're also aware that other people will watch this post, the live session. But I'm grateful that a few people will join us now. And
okay,
if I'm honest, when we have these type of conversations, I wish that people responded in the way that they would typically respond to, other content. But we recognize that there's still a bit of a way to go, and that's why we're having a conversation like this, today, because this extra seats conversation, there are people who you would ask what is going on, they just don't know about it. So we want to be able to use this opportunity, to share some knowledge with people so that they know what exactly they need to do and, what role they can play, if at all. So, Nkiru, thank you once again for joining us. For everyone on the call, welcome again. If you have questions, please feel free to put it in the comment section and make sure that you engage with us as we go along. All right? Great. So, Nkiru, let me just give them a background. I mean, you're here to lay a solid foundation, but for people who might have never ever heard about this extra seats, it's like, what is it? Where has it come from? So as part of the ongoing constitutional amendment process, all right, which is ongoing in the Ninth Assembly, there has been a proposal for a reserved seats bill, and so this bill is an act to actually make provision in the Constitution for extra seats for women. All right, and so the idea is that in addition to existing seats, we want extra seats for women. And this is at the state assemblies and at the National Assembly. So in these two categories. It was sponsored by the Deputy Chief Whip alongside the Speaker of the House and over 85 members, which is really great as well. So Nkiru, let's dive right in.
Okay.
I think that a few people who are joining us now and who will watch this later will be like, really? In the scope of everything that's going on in my life, why should I care about these extra seats bill? What was my own inside the matter, So can you share with us, from your perspective, why this bill is important?
Okay, thank you very much, Boste. Well, the bill is important because it affects women. It affects women's rights. And I'm sure, even if you're not a woman, I'm sure you know a woman around you. Be it a friend, your mother, your sister. And the bill is trying to remedy a lingering problem, a long-standing problem in Nigeria. I'm sure for people who have been following the news or who follow legislative work, or even just following the news, I'm sure you must have heard about the rankings, Nigeria's rankings on women in parliament, the numbers of women in the National Assembly and the State Houses of Assembly. We have one of the worst records in the world. In fact, shortly before this, I went back to the Interparliamentary Union, that's the IPU rankings, and I realized that we dropped. The last time I checked it, last in December, just before the holidays, I think we're about like 181 out of 187. That was bad enough. And then now, as of January 2022, we are now down to 184. And in the 8th Assembly, just a few years ago, I think we're about maybe 180 or so, or thereabouts, or 179. So, so what does this really mean? What this means is that we really don't have women represented in decision-making structures. So you really should care, because a lot of the things, happen in the country in terms of, policies or allocation of public funds and resources to issues, they all happen at high-level decision-making structures. And the National Assembly is a decision-making platform. The same thing with the state assemblies. So these are the people who allocate public funds, just to put it simply. So you should care, because, public funds is your money, you pay tax. So we don't allocate public funds, they allocate public funds. And when you have a decision-making body like the legislature making decisions on allocation of public funds, making laws for you, then you really should care, because every decision that is taken in that platform affects you one way or the other. And if you don't have enough women, or in places where you don't have enough women, it's really influences the quality or the type of decisions that are being made. So it's I like to think that women representation is, for me, I see it as a bread and butter issue. It's very, very, very simple. People like Nigerians will say, how does something affect the price of tomatoes in the market? Well, it does affect the price of tomatoes in the market, because these are people who make decisions. They make laws for you. So you really should care about the composition. There are a lot of Nigerians pay attention to National Assembly, but most times, it's on issues like maybe funding costs. I think people are quite familiar with what happens in National Assembly, but in terms of the composition, I always wonder, when people look at the legislature, don't they actually notice that there's something wrong? And I think, maybe we'll come to that, because we've normalized seeing a lot of men in these structures. You look at the National Assembly, you just see, you see a sea of agbadas and caps. You don't see enough gay ladies. You really don't see women. So I find it surprising that people actually don't find it surprising or shocking. You have, in the Senate, it's 8 out of 109, House of Reps, 13 out of 360. Then you have states that don't even have women at all. So these are people who are sitting down making laws. They are representing your interests, and then you don't have women. Meanwhile, in the families, you have women making decisions. You have women taking care of the families. So I think just for that reason alone, people should actually really, really care. People really should care.
Thank you so much, Nkiru. I think you've started to raise, important issues on how it affects me, because I think that Nigeria can be that country where, just because of the hardship. Right now, there's fuel scarcity, there's electricity challenges, there's nationwide, strikes, and people are just like, look, I just even can't be bothered, right? But I like how you say, look, it is a bread and butter issue, because it does affect, the price of fish. When you said that, I thought to myself, literally, it does affect the price of fish. You know what I mean? And everything else. So I think the next question would be, okay, you've told me why I should care, but, there are already 469 seats, right?
Yes.
And, they're filled with people with agbadas and, pillars. And then the question is, can't we just take from that existing 469, for women? So for someone asking that question, what would you say?
Okay, so I think that's a very, very good question, because we get that a lot, and I think a lot of people don't understand why this is a proposal. And so the thing is, the campaign for increased women's representation has been going on for decades, and we've had this conversation before. There are people there are women who are now grandmothers. They started this struggle when they were very, very young women. Now they are grandmothers. I remember one of my lecturers, a professor who taught me in university many years ago. And, I've graduated from the university, I've worked, and, I've come out to join her in the struggle. And she's like, see, we've been doing this thing for years. So this proposal really is, to put it simply, it's one of the best options. And I'm going to explain why, even though it doesn't sound like that. And I'm going to try and break it down. So I'm sure most people have heard of 35% affirmative action, the Beijing Platform for Action. In 1995, countries came together and said, countries need to take decision to increase the numbers of women in decision-making structures. And, I think 30% was, the benchmark that was adopted. And, that's the benchmark that's, guides other countries. But the thing is, in Nigeria, applying that 30% or that 35% benchmark or quota, let me use the word quota. Quota is like a bad word in Nigeria, and some people don't like to use it. Some of my colleagues don't like to use it in their advocacy, but really that's what it is. You can call it special measures or anything. So it's really difficult to apply in Nigeria because of our electoral system. And one thing I realized, so I have been, kind of studying this for a while, and I have been following the National Assembly's constitutional review work. And every time you see people coming to say, okay, we want 35% affirmative action, meaning, you want to see women represented, at least 35% of women represented in the National Assembly, for instance. But I've always said the question of the how has always been up in the air. The truth of the matter is that when you're talking to politicians and you're telling them 35%, the first place their mind goes to is, okay, when you say 35%, meanwhile, when you're saying you want to see more women, people assume maybe there are empty seats that are waiting for women to occupy. I think that's another thing people have to really, really, really they have to understand. You said there are 469 seats in the National Assembly. Those seats are not empty. About 94% of those seats are occupied by men. So when you're saying reserve 35% for existing seats, the first thing a politician thinks is, oh my God, my seat is going to be threatened, or whose seats are you going to reserve? And I think, one of the sponsors, Nkiru, said the same thing. They always ask whose seats. So this is the reason why, over the years, lots of women groups have not been successful with getting this 35% affirmative action. So if you're talking about affirmative action for appointed positions, it's quite easy. The Constitution says the president should take one minister from each state of the federation. You can do the math. 35% of 36, if you take one from the FCT, 37, it's very easy. And then appointed positions, they are technocrats. They serve at the pleasure of the president. You can hire and fire them. Now, for the legislature, they are not appointed. You actually have to contest. You have to run. And political parties are the gatekeepers. They are the ones that decide who gets on their ballots. So when you're saying 35% for elective positions, not appointed, of course, the gatekeepers, the first thing they'll think is who sits. And you have to remember, or that people have to remember, is that those 360 constituencies belong to people. A legislator is representing a constituency. That's basically his identity or her identity in the National Assembly. Do you understand? So they are not even only just thinking, oh, my seat is threatened. They're also thinking you are going to limit the choice of the voters in those constituencies. Because if you say you're doing 35%, what it means is you take out the map, just imagine 360. It means you're going to maybe you take Ifelodun, you take Amak, maybe you take Aba. Do you understand? Just take random constituencies. They are real life consequences. Those constituencies belong to people. So there's this threat of losing power and losing seats, which is normal in countries that are undergoing democratic transition, just like Nigeria. Democratic consolidation. So, and the truth of the matter is, if you really want to build political will to change things or to have advocacy results, you really have to that fear really has to be addressed. So what a lot of countries that operate a kind of electoral system do is to create additional seats. And to explain it further, the electoral system is very, very important in designing a quota. So a lot of countries use what is called proportional representation. When they go in for elections, they win seats according to the number of votes they get. But that's not how it is in Nigeria. And then again, Nigeria uses what they call single member constituency, and to put it simply, it's one rep per constituency, one rep per district. What happens is, because it's only one seat that is up for grabs, it's very, very contentious. So political parties are very, very unwilling to replace a man with a woman, because it can create tensions within the party. And this is not just in Nigeria, I can tell you for free, because even as we speak, India, a seat reservation bill, you know, they've been women, female activists have been trying to get a seat reservation bill in India's upper house, and it hasn't worked, although it has worked at the local level, and this is the reason. But in countries that operate a proportional system, they have more than one rep per constituency. So you can come to one constituency or one district and you have 5 people, sometimes 10, sometimes even up to 20, depending on the country. So the design, I think, and that's, for me, I think that is where the missing piece of the information, that's where the information gap is. Because when people get 35% affirmative action, oh, Rwanda has done it, Senegal did 50-50, Namibia has done it. You don't run our system, yes, they've done it. Their system and our system is not the same. The electoral system just means the way votes are translated into seats. Their system and our system is not designed the same. These are places where you can have up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 people representing one constituency. So what happens is that if, for instance, in a particular constituency, you have 3 members can represent one constituency. Do you know what that means for the party? There's wiggle room. So out of that 3, they can say, okay, we'll nominate one female. But in Nigeria, it's one. And actually, we have the smallest constituency sizes. People who run first past the post system have the smallest constituency sizes. So it's one rep per constituency, one rep. And that's one thing a lot of people don't understand. So when we are comparing ourselves to Rwanda, Namibia, and the rest, yes, it's good. They use, I mean, it's best practice, it's good for modeling. But when you are designing special measures, and you say you want to use affirmative action, you have to design it to fit your own electoral system. So our electoral system is not the same with those countries that have very high representation of women. So Uganda, you know, we have the same system as Uganda, and Uganda has extra seats. They have seat reservations for women. Tanzania has the same system, and they use reserved seats for women. So that is how this proposal came about, because it's difficult with the way our ballots are designed. It's difficult to displace one person. It's contentious, but in most of those countries, they have incentives because they have bigger constituencies and they have more members represented. So applying 35% numeric quotas are easier. Then somebody may ask, so why don't you do it from the candidate list? You can do it from the candidates list in terms of, okay, 35% of candidates must be women. But it is not results-based. Seat reservations or extra seats are result-based. So if you go to the Constitution and say we're reserving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seats for this group of people, women, youth, it's there. The constitutional mandate is clear. So it means a system has to be worked out to make that happen. But for candidacy, there's no guarantee the person is going to win. And let me tell you what political parties do in countries that use candidates quotas. Like, if you don't attach rules to them, if there are no sanctions, if there's no penalty, they don't work. So in most countries that use candidate quotas, especially in that PR system, there's always sanction. And there's sometimes there are benefits. Like in Ethiopia, in some countries, the government provides public funding for political parties, depending on the number of women you nominate. So there's a threshold. If you have women in your executive committee, they give you funding. And then in some countries, if you don't nominate women, there's a penalty. I think the greatest penalty is rejection of your nomination list, which is what Senegal does. In Senegal, if you don't have women, Senegal has a 50-50 parity law. If you don't have up to 50%, they won't take your list. But in our Electoral Act, INEC is not allowed to tamper. Once a party nominates a candidate, that's it. You're not allowed to tamper with the nominations list. That's one. And then another thing political parties do is, even where they do that 35%, they will take the women and put them in, and put them in seats that are not winnable. They can take them to a place that is not their stronghold. You get where they know, sometimes parties have stronghold. Okay, in this area, we don't even have supporters. We don't have a support base. You now take all your women, you calculate 35%, look for all the places you cannot win elections. You now push the women there to go and contest elections. So these are some of the challenges I've been seeing. So I'm not saying it doesn't work. But again, because of the system we use, it's difficult. So that is why this is expert studies. This is not just something we came up with. This is not just a trend we're following. Expert studies have shown that seat reservations are the best fits with countries that use Nigeria's electoral system. And let me tell you that a lot of people don't know this, but in the Waste Panel reports in 2008, additional seats, 108 additional seats was actually recommended. I was actually shocked when I saw it, 108, because in the course of their work, they discovered that this system we are running is not favorable to women. This is a fact. It's a known fact all over the world. Example, United States of America, bastion of democracy. Women have been voting for over 100 years. They don't even have up to 30% of women in the US Congress. Why? And I'm saying this for people who keep saying, oh, women should get more training. Women should equip themselves. They should get more resources. And then somehow they will start winning elections. That's not actually how it works. If the institution and the formula, the election formula is skewed against you, if it doesn't favor you, there's really little you can do to actually overcome that system. So that is why the recommendation is, see, if you have this kind of electoral system, this is the kind of affirmative action that suits you, that matches the most, and that is what you should use to increase the numbers of women in the parliament. I haven't spoken for too long.
I mean, what I appreciate is taking us to school and back, but in a very simplified way, because I think your point is that we make so many assumptions,
Yes.
and like what's happening in the National Assembly. We are interested, but I think with conversations like an extra seat bill, it's just something that goes over people's heads, and I really appreciate, and that's why we're having this conversation, so that people can understand the real reasons behind these things, so that when they go away, they can explain it in a way where it's like, with their full chest, they have an understanding. So thank you so much for that. For everyone who just joined us, welcome. We're having a conversation with Nkiru Uzodi, who's a program manager at Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, PLAC. And we're talking about the extra seats bill. So Nkiru, let's take this further. So we've talked about why I should care. We've talked about, why couldn't we take existing seats, and you've, really elaborated on why we need extra seats. Now, I feel like the next question that somebody will be asking is our legislature, isn't it all expensive already? Like extra seats, really? Like, where are we going to get that money from? We borrowed ourselves to sleep up, and what would you say? What would you say to somebody who's really like, no, I don't care what you're saying. It's just too expensive. We already have a bloated legislature, and so what would you say to that?
Well, I'm going to say the same thing the female legislators have said, which is reduce the wastages right now. So this is it. So it's a real concern. Let me even start by saying it's a real concern, because when this came out, even for some activists and some members of civil society, this was a big concern, as in, we've been crying that the legislature is overbloated, openness, we don't understand the way the resources are being spent, and then we're asking for additional seats. But my question is, do we know how much that we're losing by excluding women? There is actually a cost to exclusion, and nobody's actually paying attention to that. There's a cost. There's an economic cost. There's a monetary cost. There is, also, the cost of discrimination.
A social cost. Yeah.
Yes, there's a social cost to it, and investing in women is, for me, is really the best way to go. In fact, empowering women is smart economics, and the figures are there, the numbers are there. There have been studies in by the IMF, by the World Bank, and different institutes saying that if African countries, or if Nigeria invests more in women, then there'll be an increase in GDP. And recently I was listening to a talk by Christine Lagarde, the former head of IMF, and she said the same thing, that why is it that after COVID, it's the countries that are led by women that had the best response to the COVID pandemic. It's not a coincidence. So it's investments. So yes, the National Assembly is overbloated. That concern is there. But the wastages can be cut. Okay, look at the budget from last year. I was reading a report, I think by Budgets, and they identified, duplications in the budget, those kind of things. Repetitive items are duplicated, projects that don't really make any sense. If they really see, all it takes is just political will. All it takes is political will. And then PLAC, my organization, we did a study, really. We actually went and did a cost-benefit analysis, to respond to this. And we found that it will cost less than 1% of the national budget. But I think more importantly, this is actually a temporary measure. I think that's another thing people need to understand. It's not meant to be a proposal if it's passed. It's not meant to be there for all times and purposes. It's not something that is meant to be entrenched in the law. So the whole idea of temporary special measures is that it's like a boost. You introduce them, to correct historical imbalance, to give women an opportunity. And then after a while, there's usually what they call a sunset clause, an expiry date. After a while, you withdraw them. So this is not something that is intended to be in operation for a very long time. It's intended to just come in to allow women, because the whole idea is to normalize the presence of women in the legislature. I think a lot of people feel legislature is not a place for women, honestly. And I keep saying it, people don't take it seriously, but just imagine young girls and young women, looking at the National Assembly, going in and seeing, everybody there is male, and they think it's normal. People don't understand what that does to our psychology or the psyche of your mind. You feel, okay, this is not a space for women. And, that really, really needs to change. So for me, I see it as an investment that will result to larger gains on the long term. Because, to be honest, even without these additional seats, there's still wastage going on. As in, really, how is the economy doing? There's still wastage going on. And, women have been known to manage the economy and take very good decisions. Female legislators are known to work. They are known to be very, 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 very effective. So, for those of us who are supporting it, we are seeing, the benefits to outweigh the costs. And because right now, there are just too few. There are just too few of them to really make any significant change. And if we really want to see substantive change in terms of good policy outcomes, then you actually need more women. If we don't want to spend that money, then reserve from the existing seats. But it's that resistance. Yeah, we can reserve. But again, it's the reality of our political environment. There's resistance. And, I do policy advocacy. And really, when you're advocating for something, sometimes, they say we should set smart goals, a specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. If what you're advocating for is not realistic and is within a particular time frame, sometimes you have to go back and retool. And this is just basically what this proposal is all about. It's about the supporters of this bill, the women going back and saying, okay, this hasn't worked. I've heard male politicians say some of the proposals brought before are dead on arrival. When the decision makers are not willing to even look at the other options you're putting on the table, and they're saying, see, me as in us shifting or doing anything from what exists is out of the question. What do you keep pushing? It's like hitting your head on the wall and expecting something to change. Do you keep pushing? So this is like an attempt to, okay, if this is not going to work, how about consider this option just for a short time, for a period, to see if there's going to be a change. But if anybody thinks that somehow magically the numbers of women in the National Assembly is going to increase, I'm serious. They are joking. Honestly, they're joking. I hear all these things because I have this arguments and conversations with certain people. I hear this about, women want to be handed power on a platter of gold. Women don't want to work hard. I'm like, who told you women don't work hard? They don't get on the ballots. They're not getting on the ballot. Political parties are gatekeepers. I was reading something. They said there are three stages of election. One is self-selection, your own selection. The second is a party selection, and then the last is the voter selection. By the time it gets to the voters, the candidates have been chosen. Really, at the end of the day, what a lot of voters don't realize is that you are actually voting. You are choosing your leaders from a set of candidates that have been chosen, pre-approved for you. So at the end of the day, do you really think that the choices that the political parties are present, do you really think they reflect your choice? And if as Nigerians in 2022, we think that candidate or nomination lists that are all men reflects the choice of Nigerians, then that is really, really problematic. Problematic. And if that is not your worldview, then you really need to speak up and challenge the status quo.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I mean, what I like about what you're saying is you're talking facts, figures, and like I feel like there's this huge assumption that we have as the citizens that we know exactly what's happening, but oftentimes, that's not backed by sort of information that's factual or that is, backed by the real evidence. So thank you so much for a lot of the things that you're sharing that I'm sure is opening the eyes of everyone who's on now and who will watch this later.
Okay.
I also wanted to add your point on cost of exclusion.
Yes.
Too much compared to the cost of exclusion. It's incomparable as far as and for Nigeria, one of the things that a lot of us complain about, and even why budget will be doing that report that you made reference to, is corruption. And and Transparency International has the Corruption Perception Index, which they do every year and they've done for many years now. And the Corruption Perception Index actually shows that there's a direct correlation between having more women in governance and the corruption perception index being low. Actually evidence-based. So there is a direct correlation that actually having more women in leadership positions and obviously having the corruption perception index of that country as well, I mean, in the positive way, it's high because, it's less corruption. Do you see what I'm trying to say? And, if we're all complaining that corruption is one of the challenges of this country, and the fact that we don't, like you said, there's so many wastages due to corruption, then this is almost like a no-brainer, right? And so there's so many levels to why we should all be supporting this bill. I think that that's really the conversation.
Yes. And
So,
yeah, I just wanted to just quickly ask, now you mentioned corruption, even security. I mean, look at even the insecurity the country is facing right now is more than enough reason for us to take, the issue of women participation seriously. Because, you need women in peace building, you need women in conflict resolution. And, women's leadership style is known to be very, very collaborative. And a lot of countries, that are coming out of conflicts, a lot of them have, taken steps to include women in decision making. In fact, you see, the thing is, in Nigeria, we sign all these commitments and conventions. We have SDGs, we have the MDGs and SDGs, then you have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. You have all this. So, even apart from this proposal being a smart goal, let me just put it that, a smart objective, there's also the rights claim, the rights issue. And, there's a rights issue. You've signed commitments. Why are you not domesticating the foreign protocols and conventions? So are you just doing it for optics? Are we, okay, let me use the word are we just doing it for optics? Are we just doing it for optics? We have SDGs, and those SDGs all interact with each other. And you have SDG 5 on women. And you're saying, we are saying that we cannot improve as a democracy. There are certain things, not even certain things, we can't achieve all those things without women being in the room, being in the conversation. And then we are fighting an insurgency. We have a situation where girls are not going to school, or girls are going to school and getting kidnapped. And we're talking about peace building, we're talking about rebuilding, and then women are not in the room. What are you rebuilding when most of the people go to the IDP camps? It's mostly women and children. So really, how can you have a conversation about rebuilding from insurgency, from conflict, when women are not there? And really, women are disproportionately affected. Women and children are the ones who suffer, who suffer the most. So I think that's also another thing. Even in legislation in other countries, it has been found that women legislate more. They legislate more around issues that affect the Human Development Index. You talk about, some people call it soft issues, but whatever, they are still important. You're talking about livelihoods, health, education. Those are the bedrocks of security. We cannot talk about security in isolation from livelihoods. Do you understand? School, education, health. Women put more money, and that's why I said in the beginning, when you said, why should people care? The National Assembly allocates your resources. They sit down and decide how the country's money is going to be spent. They have the power of the purse. We as citizens are, okay, maybe through engagements or, representation of constituent interests, we can make our inputs, public hearings and the rest. But I don't have a vote. I'm not elected. You don't get to vote. At the end of the day, we can make our inputs, but they are the ones taking the decision. So they sit down and decide this is how money is going to be allocated. And if you come out and make commitments and sign protocols, and then in your lawmaking, you're not putting money to these things because you need resources to work. If you say you want to end SGBV, sexual and gender-based violence, you need money to make it happen. You say you want to stop child marriage, you want to increase enrollment of kids. Those things need money. And if you're not putting money, it's just like those of us working in the NGO sector, and you're doing project management, and they don't ask you to go and do a budget, and you now put all your budgets into your overhead and an administration, and then there's nothing left to the work. Do you understand the point I'm trying to make? I mean, what kind of results or outcomes are you going to have if you're not allocating resources appropriately? And then even apart from that, you're also not following up or doing oversight. You know, the people you have appropriated the resources or allocated the resources to, you're not following up with them, you know, the ministries, department, and saying, okay, so this money we gave you to maybe build a shelter. So what happened? Did you build this shelter for women? You know, look at what Tracker is doing with projects. The same thing, you know, your people are supposed to build primary healthcare centers, and you go there and you see one, I don't know what to call it, ramshackle, I don't know what to call it, like dilapidated buildings and all that. So that is why people should actually really care about those things, because it really, really affects our day-to-day life, especially considering that we have an insurgency problem that we're trying to come out of, and there's going to be rebuilding. You will need women in the room to do that rebuilding.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And again, thank you for highlighting this. You know, it's almost like somebody saying, almost like a formula. Why should I care? You know, we're giving you all the points on why you should care. So let's go to practicality now. You know, what is to happen next, right? Where are we? What is to happen next? And then, you know, if you can speak a little bit to why now, because you know what bothers me is that we do have this once in a lifetime, like you said, literally, some of these women who have been, part of these fights, they've lived a lifetime fighting this fight, right? So we then have this once in a lifetime opportunity to make this happen. So if you can speak to what the practicalities are in terms of the process, the next steps, you know, if it happens and all of that a little bit, and then if you tell us why it is important now, because otherwise, I mean, at the minimum we'll wait for, that's what we know, but you know, why is it important for us to push for it?
Well, there's an ongoing constitutional review process, and this is a constitutional amendment bill, because, you know, that's one of the reasons why this is being proposed, you know, because it's watertight. The constitution it's unassailable, if I may use the term. It's the supreme law of the land. So that's the best place to put it. A lot of countries who, you know, who use similar measures have this in their constitution. So why is it now? There's an amendment process going on. And the thing is, because we have this cyclical process of amending our constitution, this comes up every time. And see, I have been in my office, I have been working on our constitutional review project for 10 years. I'm serious, since 2012, I started following the National Assembly's constitutional review process. And I don't even consider myself old by any standards, but 10 years is the same thing. You have one assembly rolls in, and it's the same thing. Oh, we want 35%. And then I think the most annoying part is, you know, you have all this, maybe March 18th International Women's Day, you know, and see politicians, they come out, you know, they make these grand statements, you know, women tie their beautiful and colorful wrappers and all that. And even during elections, you know, women come out to mobilize, to vote and all that. I think, you know, really, we should say enough is enough. As in, enough with the optics. This is a time for action. So every constitutional amendment process, you know, has always been an opportunity for people to come in with their demands, you know. So, you know, this issue of extra seats is just one of the many issues being considered. There are several other things, you know, there's local government autonomy, there's some even independent candidacy, and even several other things concerning women, you know, amendments that are being considered concerning women. But this is like the big one. This is the big one. So why now? You know, because there's a process going on, and I really believe, you know, when you're doing advocacy, you should watch out for windows of opportunity and take it. Even though in the past, you know, it hasn't been successful, but, you know, like they say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Change takes a long time. So why now? There's an ongoing process. The National Assembly is about to vote on constitutional amendments, to put it very, very plainly now. And I think the reports we have is that may happen this week. So this special seats bill has scaled the Constitutional Review Committee. It was adopted, after a lot of lobbying and hard work. So it's going to go to the floor. Every member of the National Assembly is going to have to vote on it. And we need two-third majority in each chamber for it to pass. I'm trying to get the figures. So two-thirds, so which means in the Senate, it's going to we need at least about 73 votes. And then for the House of Reps, about 240. So if we don't support this now, there's a possibility that, it will be taken seriously. And after that, it's going to go to the state assembly. So this is an opportunity. There's a window of opportunity that is open that we should take advantage of. And of course, like I mentioned, women have been campaigning for inclusion for decades. So I think the question should be, why not now?
Love that. Why not? And really, if anyone can answer that question after this conversation with me, then you're welcome. But if you have any, as we wrap up, please put it in the chat and the conversation, and we will ask. This is why we're having this conversation, to create awareness, to interact, to hear from you. And I think what I would say is that this is the first in our 5-part series taking place every night this week. We're going to have different guests. Nkiru was the first. Thank you so much, Nkiru. You've laid such a fantastic foundation. While we wait for people, if they have any questions or comments, I just want you to give us, so what is our call to action? So you've come, you've given us really solid information, educated us, you've enlightened us, and then so what next? What can people who watch this, who have joined, who watch this, what can they do, themselves and everyone that they know? I think that we've been able to convince them on why this conversation is important, and they are convinced and they're going away. But what can they do?
Spread the word. Like I mentioned at the beginning, there's still some information and knowledge gap around this bill and why it's even being proposed. It's not just a trend, even though the use of affirmative action quotas is a trend worldwide, but it's not just a trend. We're just jumping in just because, we want to feel like, oh, we've arrived. No, it's, our numbers are very, very, very poor, honestly. It's, in that IPU ranking where we're 181st of 187, the two, we're at the bottom three. Yes, 184th of 187. Yes. Where we have the worst record in West Africa. Then the two other countries that we stand higher than is Eritrea and Somalia. Eritrea, they haven't had elections since 1993. So as far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't even be on that ranking. Somalia, of course, we know what's happening. It's such a fragile country. They were supposed to have elections last year, but they are still fighting. So these are countries that have been plagued by war and conflict, and this is the kind of company. I'm not trying to move down those countries, but they have a reason, they have an excuse. You haven't had elections. And ironically, those two countries actually have quota provisions for women, just that the country is too unstable for them to have serious elections. So if they decide to get their act together, I'm sure they're going to have more women. Look at Saudi Arabia. Honestly, the thing is really, really baffling. It's baffling. Saudi Arabia, women just started voting in 2015. 2015 in Saudi Arabia. But between that time and now, somehow they have managed to create a quota, special measures for women. They have 20% of women in their advisory council. It's a monarchy. They have, it's almost like a monarchy there, and it's still an authoritarian regime. But for them to, after so many decades, decide, okay, we think we should, women should be able to vote. What does that say? That countries are letting go of long-held traditions. So that is such a significant move for such a conservative country. And then in this country that is is a secular country, we're supposedly educated, we're supposed to be the giants of Africa and all, we're supposed to be exposed. And then we have this abysmal records. It's honestly, it's really, really shocking. So I think people should spread the word and make people really understand how serious this is. There are 15 states that don't have a woman. Yes, in their state assembly, both from the north and the south. And I think even in the entire northwest, I think there's just one woman in the state assembly. So I think people should spread the word, explain why this proposal, is coming up at this time. And I think people should also open up their minds to have a conversation about it, because sometimes when there's a very low appetite for women's issues, for reforms around women issues in Nigeria. So, but for me, I think if people are open to even having conversation, I think that's a good starting point. Open to having conversations and open to actually understanding what the problem is. Because for me, I feel there has to be an acknowledgement that there's a problem. So I think that's what we can do. We have to, that has to be clear to other people, to people around us, that there's a problem. Because if people don't acknowledge that there's a problem, then for them, the solution is not even there. I mean, they can't even begin to talk about a solution. They don't acknowledge the problem. So that's it. And, the usual thing, talk to your rep. And, if you come across, spaces where these conversations are being held, to chip in and have conversations, chip in and add your opinion. But I really think more people really need to understand why this is being proposed at this time, and then talk to their friends about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you so much for coming to share with us, so freely, but in a way that I think everyone really can go away and say why, what, and I think that really this is the foundation that we wanted to lay for the rest of the conversation that will happen tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So for everyone who has joined us, we want to thank you and join me in thanking Nkiru for her time and coming here to share with us. This is just the beginning of the conversation. We're going to be here again, same time at 8 p.m. West African time, depending on where you are. And we're going to be talking to somebody else who's also being part of this journey. And, the whole idea is what to ensure that you can engage better and you can join the movement, and ultimately to ensure that when this bill does go to the floor, voted in favor for, and also at the state. So thank you so much, Nkiru, for spending this last 1 hour with us.
Thank you so much.
It's been great having you, and we look forward to hopefully coming back to celebrate and to talking about the...
Hopefully, everyone, just, listen out this week. The voting may happen this week or next week, but it's going to happen very soon. So, I hopefully will be coming back to celebrate.
All right. Thank you so much, Nkiru, and thanks, everyone. Make sure, same time, 8 p.m. tomorrow, for another very insightful and important conversation. Thanks, everyone.